All right, welcome back to another episode of the Epic Meta podcast. George, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Good, good. A little sleepy, but just waking up as we are going to get into this episode. And so today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about current events, and then we'll shift into the hero's journey. Um, we're going to cover, I think, two events that are a little standing out and significant in the world today, and the first one is pretty sad. The second one is a little bit happier, a little bit more hopeful and exciting. But right now, it is currently May 30th, and I think in the last week, this past whole week, there's been riot and protests all throughout the country because there was a police killing, a police murder, yet again of a Black American gentleman, George Floyd. So yeah, I don't know what much to say. It's getting to the point now where I'm as frustrated as a lot of other people, I think, um, and I feel bad that I didn't do anything other than like retweeting certain things, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing enough when I see this stuff occurring around me. Um, how do you process stuff when yeah, how do you process something like this on your end?
Well, I think at the moment we're in the thick of it. So it's a different sort of mindset at that point.
Mm,
As we get some distance from this, I think it'll fall into a larger perspective.
mm,
So I try not to make too many judgments initially because I
mm-hmm,
want to see how it'll shape out. Um, there's definitely a problem of, uh, I guess, white police officers being more violent towards black citizens. I think we've seen a lot of examples of that happening, and if we're going to maintain a society that involves multiple races, then that is an issue that needs to be addressed.
yeah.
So there's a problem there. It needs to be addressed. I'm not sure exactly how it can be addressed
Mm,
because the culture in law enforcement is very entrenched, and
yeah.
it's very difficult to change
To
that
fix.
unless
Yeah.
there's some major overhaul. But
Mm,
major overhauls are tough to do and require political will. So
yeah. So this was before my time because I think you previous conversation, we talked about how the first movie I ever seen in the States is Lion King, and that was 93. And in LA, there was an incident in 92. Of course, I'm blanking on the name right now. Um,
Rodney King.
but yes, so there was a Rodney King incident in 92, and I was a little kid, so I didn't really understand. It was through, history and social research that I kind of get what was happening. But do you remember that incident and when you were around, like seeing the news or came by at some other time?
Yes, I remember it well. Well, I mean, well enough that
Mm,
someone can remember something that long ago. But I remember being aware of it and
mm-hmm,
being sort of shocked that that a large swath of Los Angeles was on fire. Um,
mm,
and soon after that event, the O.J. Simpson trial
mm,
happened, and I saw
yeah.
I saw a remake. It was a series of episodes where they redid the O.J. Simpson trial, actors played the roles of like O.J. Simpson and Marsha Clark and all the other people. Do you know
Mm.
what I'm talking about?
I think so. I don't know if I've seen it.
I think it was called The People versus O.J. Simpson. I could be
Mm.
wrong about that. Anyway, it was pretty compelling. It was well done. But the first scene in that series was of the Rodney King riots, and it was put there as an example of, or to explain how there was distrust of the police in Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles, because particularly distrust of the police from African Americans, and
Mm.
and it was that distrust that allowed O.J. Simpson to be acquitted in his trial. That was the part of the argument that was made by the series.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's sad, but I guess the events are happen too close to each other. But with our current events, a lot of blame, or at least social media, the instigation is not even it's not even blame. There's a lot of triggering factors. Let's just say that, and definitely our current president is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I bring up Rodney King because this is not uh, a new, or like new thing because of just his presidency. I do think he fan the flames of racism, but I think our culture was already like this uh, since even like the 60s when the civil rights movement occurred. People think it's over, or we're now a better society. But sadly, I don't think that's the case. I think we have to continue fighting for civil rights, and do things systematically where we can ensure um, stuff like this doesn't happen again. So yeah, it's getting better and better, but in the long haul, I think right now we're in the midst of it, so it's a little sad and upsetting, and yeah, I'm still I feel rejected in some way every time I see something like this, and then at the same time, it's just a lot of mixed feelings, and
Why do you
because
feel rejected?
because I'm a minority, right, and I'm immigrant, and I'm part of this larger society where um, and I'm blessed and lucky to have a career, work a job, and to a certain case, never will most likely will never experience anything like that, or with anyone I know. Uh, but it just uh, with social media and then with cell phones being available, you can see from the point of view, and this is not isolated. I'm looking at a news article where this has been happening for the last like this last year, but like you know, I think there was a gentleman that got shot in his apartment, right? There was I think I don't know his name now. It's so sad, but uh, while I look it up, maybe you remember his name. He was in an apartment. There was a cop that came in the wrong apartment, and then he got shot and died.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I remember
even
that.
though, yeah. And then on Twitter, and I'm looking at a news article. There's this guy, and if he didn't record it, no one would have believed him because he was in New York. His name is Christian Cooper. He's just walking around, confronted a woman that's a white woman, telling her that she just needs to leash her dog, and then it escalated to the point where she was calling the cops on him, and nothing happened with him. He was safe, but isn't the only one. There's other Twitter videos where I keep seeing people get approached from doing their job. There was a UPS guy that was just delivering his, like packages, got approached by a woman, older white female in the neighborhood, and I feel rejected because from his standpoint, he's full American, and just because they're going through their motion of their daily lives, now whether their criminal background or not, it just incident after incident after incident, um, it just feels like because of our current culture, the larger mass that are normal, decent people, that part of the culture doesn't get celebrated enough. so that the other part are, I would say, from the 90s early on, you know, if you are protesting, like, so I remember growing up in Cleveland, there was a KKK, I don't want to say protest, but like, they had
Rally.
an event. Yeah, they had an event, and we somewhat allowed it to happen. Like there was police protecting them. It was very quiet. Like the media didn't cover it but it happened. And I would think in today's world, and this was late 90s, 2000, we shouldn't allow the KKK to have a parade anywhere or event anywhere at all. Because freedom of speech and then hate speech should be differentiated. And right now, there's a lot of debate where we allowed hate speech versus freedom of speech. Um, and that only, encourage all the kind of hate that's already buried in our culture from way beyond, from our past. Um, and that makes it very hard to go through the motion of daily life. And, I can compartmentalize it and just ignore it and just go do my job. But in the background, you know, you're just never the same or on the same footing as your colleagues or anyone else. It's just not the same culture for you. You're always going to be in a subculture. And that's how I feel about it. I can only imagine like how, let's say, Black Americans or Hispanic Americans feel about it in their world. Um,
Well,
so,
that's a tough knife's edge to
mm,
traverse, because we can see. So freedom of speech is constitutionally protected, as you know,
hmm
but obviously there has to be limits to that. So where do you draw
right.
that? Where do you draw that
Mm,
line? And that that's been hammered out in the federal courts for most of our country's history.
yeah. Yep.
So
And I think it's just a tough road. Like you said, it's just, I think it will be here with us for a long time because we will continue to have, I would say, ebb and flow. Certainly, if certain, you know, political parties or political wills happen, then you see like these factions or groups go away. But I think between all the social media, and then I would say empowerment for these hate groups, they feel more empowered and they're, to be able to voice their theories and opinions. It's not in the background anymore. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm adult versus when I went to high school, I was a teenager, so I didn't, really see these things. Um, I don't have that context, but now as an adult, I see more of it than I did before.
I think it
Um,
has to do with the changing demographics of the United States. Um, the In terms of the racial percentages,
mm-hmm.
the white population is shrinking in size
Mm,
relative to uh, the non-white population,
mm-hmm.
and so as that's happening, it's it's stirring up, I would say, resentment from certain segments of the white population that feel like they were entitled to something that's being taken
Yep.
away from them.
Yep.
So it might just be a reaction to that, and as we progress through this transition, we'll come out on the other side with a different perspective. But
Mm,
it's tough going through the transition for some people, and that's why I think you're
yep.
hearing more of it at this time.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Just a sad state of affairs, and I don't know how other countries are fixing it or are better than us, or do they experience the same thing as well? But it seems very, uh, it's something in our culture that I don't know how we can grow out of it, for a lack of a better word, and to get to the state of being where, we're more open, like every other culture
Well, I think
So,
it's like one step forward, two steps back, or two steps
mm,
forward, one step back.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it feels. My hunch is that we're heading in the right direction, but uh, every so often we're gonna experience a period where uh, there's some lashback or
mm,
reaction to the way to the direction that we're heading. When Barack Obama was elected, felt like
mm-hmm,
we were making a lot of progress, and then obviously I see Trump as a reaction against that progress. But
mm,
but maybe after Trump, there'll be another period of moving forward.
yeah, yep. Let's hope for that. Anything else you want to add?
Race is just a very dicey subject, particularly for me
Yeah,
being a white person. Obviously, there's different rules of what's appropriate to say and what's not, depending
yeah,
on what race you are.
yeah.
And
In America as a whole, though,
it makes me
you know,
uncomfortable, needless to say.
yeah. Well, I think in America as a whole, as our history of the country, it's not, it cannot be forgotten or not discussed because we have a slave population, uh, and other countries did it too, right? Like all the European countries did the same thing, but somehow in America it is worse, or at least in my opinion, worse than other countries moving from that historical background. I think
I
our
I think that has to do with how racially homogenous those countries are compared to the United States. So if you go to Germany, most people
mhm,
are of German ethnic stock. There are
mhm,
minorities there, but compared the minorities' population size compared to the German population size,
mm,
it is much smaller, let's say.
mhm,
Whereas in the United States, I believe currently white people are still the majority, but their majority is shrinking, and also their majority relative to the size of minority populations has always um, it, the minority populations have been larger in the United States as a percentage of the population compared to other countries. So I think when
mm.
you have a racially homogenous country, it's going to be more stable, I would imagine, in terms of racial issues, because
Now,
there's a majority opinion out there. Does that make
is it
sense?
stable, and would you say that's better or worse, or is it because we're not aware of issues happening there? Because it got suppressed, for lack of a better term, because we have that history, and then we have the civil rights, and I don't remember. Maybe I'm ignorant, but you know, take a look at like England, Germany. Pick any country that went through the same experience with trying to um, when they explore Africa and capture the slave population, they have to go through the same thing as us, but they never had the civil rights movement like we did, correct? Like I don't remember or I don't know of part of my history ignorance of something else similar to the civil rights occurring elsewhere.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I think that goes back to the issue that the the size of the black population in the United States
mm,
relative to the total population was is much larger than it is in any other
mm,
non-African country,
yeah,
and because of that they have a larger voice, and because
yeah,
of that um, they're also able to form unique communities that have political power. Whereas I don't know how large the black population in England is, but I imagine it's it's very small relative to the English, ethnic population.
yeah,
And when you have a small population, I think it's easier for the the dominant population, for lack of a better word, to assimilate that smaller population, or to, accept it as a minority. When the sizes are larger, and then there's going to be some friction there in terms of the two different populations getting along and hammering out relative rights and all that.
Yeah. Yep. I think we'll just leave it as that because there isn't much else to say. It's just that we recognize, uh, yeah. I don't know, other than saying sad and worrisome, but I do hope for the better as we move forward into society. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, far away from all the things that make me, tired of humanity, is that we're going to space again. And this time, NASA is partnering with SpaceX, which we know is from Elon Musk, and they're launching a manned mission. So there's two astronauts on the SpaceX rocket or spaceship, where for the most part it's autonomous, and also they're doing returning flights, so they're no longer dumping excessive parts and waste, to get burned up in the atmosphere. So that's pretty exciting. It's happening today, also May 30th, if the weather holds up, because it's supposed to be happening early last week. So yeah, I'm gonna be watching it, although much of it I don't know what's going on because I'm limited in my rocket expertise and physics and all that jazz. But will you be watching it too, or you just heard about it and kind of track it, on the peripheral?
Well, I'm certainly interested in it. I don't know exactly what time it's going to happen. Do you?
It's gonna be around 4 p.m. Eastern time for the States.
Okay.
But
Well, I will.
they've already been streaming on YouTube and doing all these prep shows, so to speak. So I'll be, kind of watching it in the background. But yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. I remember as being a kid, and we had the space shuttle program, and that always seemed to be like sort of a half measure, because we had previously gone to the moon. Why were we not still going to the moon?
Mm.
And yeah, the space shuttle always seemed to be like a compromise, or not, like
Yeah, halfway.
not going boldly forward, but sort of, hedging your bets in a sense.
Mm.
I would like to see us going boldly forward in terms of space exploration. I like the idea of colonizing Mars, all that. So hopefully this is the beginning of something momentous.
Yeah, I think on the logistics side, like they've been partnering, of course, and they've been doing a lot of work. But on the logistics side, I think a lot of the expenses SpaceX is handling. I think this is why it's so attractive with the budget cuts from NASA not being able, because that's why they had to cut down the space shuttle's missions. I think it was just too expensive to keep doing what they were doing. So I was watching, I think last week, a small documentary on Netflix with Mark Kelly. Are you familiar with him? He has a twin brother. I forgot. I think it's Scott Kelly too. Or no. Yeah, Mark and Scott Kelly are twin brothers. And I forgot which one, but one of them, I think it's Scott, spent a year in the ISS. So the documentary was about how, that experiment was occurring or went through. So a lot of it they couldn't show because, of all the crazy science behind it. But they show like him leaving his family and him coming back, and just kind of like his general experience in space and how he kind of viewed the Earth. I take it you haven't seen that, correct?
No.
Yeah, it's more on the human side of things instead of like the space stuff. They show a little bit of like the spacewalking but a lot of the it's like I
Did it
assume secret.
did it change his perspective somehow?
Uh, no, I think he have already been to space multiple times before. But this one he broke world records for staying in the ISS for so long. And because he have, it's kind of like a rare occurrence where he has a twin that's also is an astronaut. Scientists were able to do a lot of tests and experiments on the two, how space could affect you
Oh,
for the long term travel,
so
and
one brother was the control group.
basically, yeah.
Did,
And of course, we won't see those results for a long time, but they lucked out because they were twins, so pretty much they could measure everything, right? Because I think he was doing multiple blood samples for a week, multiple, you know, uh, piss samples, and then all the other stuff as well. And they were, yeah, they were doing other stuff while he was doing his main job, which is most of the time building out the space station and whatnot. Because he stayed there for so long, they wanna test space, you know, effects on a human body. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Um, we won't know much for a long time from now until those reports or journals are written up. But it was interesting to see because the camera footage are so good now. Seeing basically space and of course planet Earth through a window. Uh, I don't know. Yeah, I would suggest take a look at it because it's only like 6 episode or something like that. It's pretty fast. But I know your schedule viewings are different than mine, so maybe it would take a long time for you. But yeah, I'm curious about how SpaceX and can work with NASA moving forward to do more, right? It's very exciting on that front. Like the the best of humanity versus the worst happening at the same time, right? It's just odd place for us to be as a species.
it is, but that's the that's the journey, and this is the moment that we're existing in, and so
Yeah.
let's see where it goes. I guess that's all I can say.
Yeah. Talking about journey, you I think from the last episode, and even the first episode too. I don't know if we hinted at it or not, but this concept of we'll transition into the hero's journey. Uh, the hero's journey seemed to be something that's Joseph Campbell started, but seemed to be a good, I would say, framework for storytelling as a whole, regardless of the medium, whether it's movies or TV shows or novels. It
Well,
seemed to be.
to clarify, Joseph Campbell studied myths from around the world, and he noticed similarities between the myths, and he cataloged them, and
Mm,
that ultimately developed into the hero's journey. But so the idea is that these are universals to storytelling, stories
mm,
that make sense to us and are meaningful to us, and they've existed since the dawn of man. I mean, so one of the myths that he looked at was the Enuma Elish, which is a Babylonian myth of Gilgamesh, and so
mm-hmm.
and that's I don't know thousands. I'm not sure exactly on the timeline, but it's thousands of years before Christ. So these
Mm-hmm.
ideas have been around for a long, long time, and
Yeah.
the reason why they appear in movies is because they resonate with us on such a deep level.
Yeah. Do you think that this basically hits us at the core? Before human civilization learned how to write, we were sharing story through means of oral communication. And I guess it's easy. It comes down to the point where the stories most remember are the ones that have these trademarks, so to speak, or ebb and flow of the hero's journey, and that's why it can hit us so hard, or we like it so much when we see these things being brought up. or follow this framework? Is that why why it sticks with us so hard,
I,
and works so well?
I think these ideas expressed in a hero's journey articulate ideas or so every story is different, so it takes the hero's journey and sort of uh, talks about it from a different perspective, but they all
Mm,
point back to these ideas, and these ideas resonate with us because they articulate something that's fundamental to existence and life itself.
mm.
It's
Wow, that's
something,
deep.
yeah. Well, it is deep, and it's really cool to think about because you know I I think we live our lives and we consume media and uh, and without thinking about it, it all seems quite different or perhaps jumbled or not connected. But there
Mm.
really is a deep connection that underlays all of this. Um, and yeah, it's very interesting, I think.
So you had me read um, the writer's journey. I didn't, of course, finish it. I just skimmed through as much as I can. I have to say, the book was very dry.
Oh, you
So,
thought it was
y-
dry?
yeah, your interpretation was the book was an easy read, which for the most part it is an easy read. But of the pages, which is I would say, a fifth of the book. I wouldn't say even a fourth or a third because I didn't read all I read as much as I can, but I lost interest a lot because here's why I lost interest. There were so many references to movies that I have no idea what the guy was talking about. Um,
Okay.
if he bring up, let's say, 100 movies, the reference I got is maybe 10 of it. So it's pretty drastic because I couldn't connect with anything he was talking
Well,
about.
there's three movies that I think about in terms of the hero's journey that I think articulate it very well.
Mm.
One is The Matrix. I assume you're familiar with The Matrix.
Yeah, so yeah, The Matrix, yeah, a big fan, and I was
Okay.
thinking about that as well. We were supposed to do some pre-planning for the show, but definitely Matrix is one
S-
where
s-
it's very formulaic, I suppose. But I could, as I was reading the books, I was like, oh yeah, and I see that, I see that.
Okay.
So yeah.
So Star Wars is another. The original A New Hope, I guess, Episode 4 is
Mm,
a good model for it, and also
mm.
the movie Rocky. Have you ever seen Rocky, the original one?
Yes, and I thought it was lame, but yeah, I
Oh,
remember seeing Rocky.
I love Rocky. Rocky makes me tear up. I love it.
So let's talk about Rocky first, then, since we have a difference there, and it's a little more interesting to go into that.
Okay.
So Rocky, he finished by having a draw, which I thought was like, what? This whole time we're working up to this, and then he just have a draw, right? Because he didn't win per se.
Hmm.
Uh, so
But
yeah, I thought it was
he went
uh,
from
unclimactic. What was your thing?
anticlimactic. Uh,
Yes.
well, okay. He went from being a bum, basically a two-bit
Mm-hmm.
fighter, to fighting to being in the ring with the world champion.
Mm,
So it was kind of a big rise for him and a
mm.
big arc for him to travel. And he couldn't have traveled that arc unless he uh, went through the stages of the hero's journey to get there. So
Yeah.
we can talk about that.
Yeah. So the call to adventure, right? Which is in the Matrix. The call to adventure is when I would say he went to the club. It was the scene where he was in his apartment, and then the computer was talking to him, and he went to this kind of concert club with the people he was selling this software to. Would you say that's the first mark
Well,
of the?
let's back up a little bit. The first stage in the hero's journey is the ordinary world.
Mm,
And it's basically you typically see the hero. So in the Matrix, it's Neo. In Star Wars, it's Luke. In Rocky, it's Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
And they're existing in an unsatisfactory state. Their life isn't going well for them. They want to be something different than what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that with Neo asleep at his computer and at work, not enjoying his cubicle existence. We see
Yep.
that
He
with
got.
we see that with Luke as a farm boy and wanting to go out and explore the galaxy, and we see that in Rocky. In the first scene in Rocky, I think he's fighting in like a very low level boxing club,
Mm.
and he like after the fight he smokes a cigarette and drinks a beer and goes back to his depressing apartment. So the ordinary world is established with all three of those. So the next stage in the hero's journey is the call to adventure and the refusal of the call. Now you mentioned Neo going to the club. I think that's certainly part of it, but where I think the call to adventure and the refusal of the call is crystallized with Neo is when Morpheus
Yep.
is on the phone with him that the agents have come into his work and they're
Mm.
going to arrest him, and Morpheus tells him to escape by walking out on the ledge, and he goes
Mm.
out there, and then he's like, no, I can't do it, and he comes back in, and then he gets
Mm.
arrested. So I believe that's where I would say the call to adventure and the refusal of the call is
Yeah.
expressed in the Matrix.
Mm. Now with Luke, how did he refuse the call? Because it didn't seem like he refused anything.
Okay, so he meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan invites him to come with him to fight the Empire or whatever.
And
Obi-Wan.
that was before his adopted parents or aunt and uncle got murdered, correct?
Right. And
So,
Luke's like, I can't do that. I have obligations here. I have to,
okay.
you know.
Yes, because he was returning whatever droids to Obi-Wan or trying to find where these owner droids is. And then we go back to the adopted parents. And then so he did refuse originally. He's like, "Nah, it's cool." but but I got application and I think it seems too much, right? Almost every time the call to adventure is just so fantastic that even though the hero has been wanting it since the beginning, I think it just shatters their world mindset that they couldn't handle it. So like you said with Neo, he just like, no man, this is crazy. I'm not I'm not I'm
I
not doing this crazy stuff, jumping outside the building. And I was like, I'm
Right,
gonna go back
because
in. Yeah.
although the ordinary world is unsatisfying, it's safe. And
Mm,
so to leave the ordinary world is risky. And so
mm.
when you try and do that, you bump up against that that force of risk, and fear comes up, and and it's like, ooh, I don't know, maybe it's
Yeah.
okay to be in the ordinary world and unsatisfied. Maybe that's better than killing myself or facing some danger that will ultimately end my existence.
For Rocky, what was that step for him? The one where he rejected and
Okay,
couldn't handle.
so he had originally approached Mickey to be his trainer, and Mickey was like, "No, you're a bum. I'm not going to train you." And then at some point, Mickey approaches Rocky and says, "Okay, I'll train you." And then Rocky's like, "No, you rejected me before. I'm not. I don't need you." But then Mickey leaves his apartment, Rocky's apartment, and then Rocky's at home alone in his apartment for like 2 minutes, and he's like, "All right, this sucks." So he runs out on the street, and he's like, "Okay, I'll you can be my trainer." So I think
Mm,
that was the articulation of the call to adventure and the refusal of the call
yep.
in Rocky.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. That's it seemed to be who would you say the mentor character is for each of those stories?
So okay, yeah. So the next stage after the refusal of the call is the meeting of the mentor, and I should say this that these stages don't have to go in this particular order. They can be mixed up a little bit. But so obviously Neo's mentor is Morpheus, Luke's
Mm-hmm.
mentor is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Rocky's mentor is Mickey the Trainer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very clear in each of the stories, like without viewing it as a framework, you can still relate to each character and you identify like, they need this person and you want them to meet, right? You want them to explore that relationship further in each of the storyline. So yeah, it's when can you think of a bad movie where there is no mentor character that might not have worked or might have worked better with a mentor character that you couldn't clearly identify a mentor um, right away.
Hmm. Can you?
I'm trying to think of hmm.
I mean, the bad movies tend not to stick in my mind. Although that's not true. I mean, we talked about the Star Wars prequels and sequels, and those definitely
Yeah.
stuck in my mind. So I guess movies that don't resonate so much tend to tend to be, or a lot of the time have this quality to them where there's not much of a character arc with the hero. So
Yes.
we talked about the sequel movies of Star Wars in our last episode, and
Yes.
one of the dissatisfying parts or qualities to them was that the new characters didn't really have any arc, or not a dramatic enough arc to make it satisfying. We talked about
Yeah.
Poe Dameron started out in the trilogy as a hotshot pilot
Mm.
and ended the trilogy as a hotshot pilot. He didn't change in any way, didn't come to some new understanding. And you contrast that with Han Solo. He starts out as a rogue, not concerned with the larger affairs of the galaxy, not willing to sacrifice himself for any bigger cause. And then by
Mm.
the end of the original trilogy, he's part of the rebellion, and he's fully invested in his friends and all that. So, and that's what made
Yeah.
him interesting, and what made Poe Dameron not interesting, I think, or at least is part of it.
Yeah, I watch some YouTube videos and they're talking about like both outwards motivation and inner motivation as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Luke it was, overcoming his fear and actually following his dream, which is to explore, instead of just being a farmer on this desert planet. And he get to do that. He get to be more courageous and more brave than what he wanted to, what he didn't want to do originally, which is stay in the planet.
Yeah.
Whereas Ray, for example, within the first movie, I don't think there was much of a inner conflict, and I think if they had to rewrite, on the original planet where she was stuck, other than disappointed of being deserted, there was no
Yeah. There,
overcoming anything. She was already a nice person. It would have been better, in my opinion, to say because she got deserted as kind of like an orphan, child, feel abandoned, and therefore turn to hate and anger, and maybe show maybe another 10 minutes of, running around being essentially selfish or something like that, and then becoming, more forgiving and a better person by
well,
participating in this bigger
yeah.
world.
I mean, I think with Ray, what made her dissatisfying from based on what we've talked about in terms of the hero's journey so far, is that okay? She had an ordinary world where she was unsatisfied, but there was nothing tying her to that ordinary world. She just wanted to leave it,
Mm,
and she had no parents. She had no friends. There
mm,
was nothing in that ordinary world that was drawing her back, and so there
mm.
was no refusal of the call because she wanted to leave, and she was given an opportunity to leave, and she left. And there was no conflict there. There was nothing. Well, maybe I like being a part scavenger, and
Yeah.
being disrespected by the monster behind the counter. that pays me for the parts. Yeah, there was nothing keeping her there.
Yeah, yeah. At least with Neo, he was doing a job and was getting paid, so it feels safe to be in that world because he knows how it works.
Well, also,
Um,
yeah, I mean, he had to confront his fear to leave the ordinary world. The
mm,
ordinary world was unsatisfying. He didn't want to be there, but in order to leave it, he had, he had to confront the fear that was keeping him imprisoned there. Ray,
mm,
there was no fear she had to confront to leave. There was
mm,
nothing keeping her in that world, and there was no fear stopping her from leaving the world. The only thing
yeah,
that kept her from leaving the world was that she needed a ship, to leave on, I guess.
yeah. I think drawing the audience in, or people like me who are just viewing, maybe I didn't watch Rocky. Uh, I think in passing, maybe I watched it once. I didn't, And now the later Rockies, I like it because of the action, but the original Rocky, I was never fully invested in it. Um, Now with, say, I guess Star Wars too, but with the Matrix, it hits me more. I think because of the all the different settings and stuff I'm more familiar with, so I like it a little bit more. Um, and I think the writing followed this framework very close. So maybe I don't know. I guess I'm biased. So I liked it a little bit better.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
mean, so Rocky and Star Wars are older movies, and they have slower pacing,
Mm,
and the Matrix was, an innovative. I mean, Star Wars was innovative too at the time, but the Matrix was innovative in terms of special effects and pacing
mm,
and just action, and it combined a lot of compelling elements, I would say, that we have come to expect in movies now.
yeah. I think with Rocky, it was just very to me, it was very boring because Stallone is not the most uh, greatest actor that we have. So I
Oh,
couldn't get.
I love it. I love Rocky. I love Sylvester Stallone. It's a
I like him
beautiful
too.
movie.
I like him too, but I could not get over like the way he talks. It was killing me. It was killing me, and I was like, "Oh my God, why do people like this movie so much? I don't get it." And maybe I'll watch it again now with this understanding, see if I can get through it. But I have a feeling there are certain things that just the pacing kills me, where he just mumbles.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I
we
was like,
like it because we can identify with that person trapped in that ordinary world that wants to leave it,
mm, yeah,
and we root for him to to exit it and
yeah,
to triumph in the end. It's I love it. It
mm,
triggers me emotionally to watch Rocky every time. But I agree, it's very dated. It's very 70s. Uh,
mm,
it's very Philadelphia, which is its own sort of category. Um,
yeah,
I lived in Philadelphia for 10 years, so
mm,
it's a kind of a meathead town, like a tough guy kind of town. So
yeah,
there's that element as well.
yeah. Maybe you liked it because of that. Because to me, it's just another town, cold and miserable, and I was like, why is this guy just walking around wearing that hat? I'm just like, ugh.
he's
Not realistic,
he's
but okay, sure.
trying to make his way in the world. He's strutting around.
Yeah.
But he's a tough guy. He's strong and formidable on that level. But on the
Mm.
inside, he's conflicted and sad and disappointed.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. The hero experienced a lot of conflicting emotions, whereas, the bland character like Ray, there was no conflict.
Yeah,
There
exactly.
was no fear. There was no, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I should do it. There was no, it was already like clearly set to go, right? Like with Neo, at least there's some conflict with, maybe I shouldn't do this. And Rocky and Luke, because why not go back to normal?
Yeah,
So yeah.
and I think that's a failing. I think of J.J. Abrams. He's more
Mm,
interested in the action
mm-hmm.
and the I don't know, battle sequences than he
Yep.
is in developing the characters,
Mm,
and I think that's clearly shown in the sequel series.
Yeah, I was watching another YouTuber who commented that he doesn't do a lot of scenes, right? So he do like a lot of moments where it's just running around, and in a action adventure, like you want that kind of directing because it moves the movie quicker
You want
and it makes it,
both.
yeah, you want both, and that's hard to do in one, perfect movie. So,
It's not that hard. There are competent uh,
movie
movie
directors,
makers out there
yeah.
that can do it.
Mm,
And Quentin Tarantino comes to mind.
mm.
It has been done. There are great movies out there. It's just unfortunately a lot of crap.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't think that gets J.J. Abrams off the hook, in my
Mm.
mind.
No, 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 not off the hook, but I guess his style of making, he's so comfortable with it, and I guess that was more important to the studio than, actual plot.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
maybe that appeals to a wide enough segment of people, who will buy tickets.
mm,
But I think there's also a rather large segment out there that wants a quality movie and wants to be taken on wants to be fully immersed in characters and in action.
yeah,
So I mean, I don't know. It feels like pandering. It feels like
yeah,
it feels
commercialism.
it feels condescending in a way. Like you're not smart enough to have a good movie. So you know
So
that's what he's saying to the audience.
I came across kind of like this whole thing because really it was actually Toastmaster introduced me to storytelling.
Hmm.
In a speech, you sometimes want to use certain aspects of storytelling. So I kind of like heard about the hero's journey through like different YouTube videos or like TED Talk or something, and kind of understand the framework a little bit. And then, of course, now with all these books, kind of understand how it's very crucial to writing novels and TV shows and movies in particular. How did you come across it? And do you remember when you came across all this stuff? Was it like
The
in
hero's
college for
journey.
you? Yeah.
I have a friend named I call him Betch. Um, that's sort of a nickname, but and he was a friend of my cousin. At They both went to Notre Dame together for college,
Mm,
and he was my introduction to the hero's journey because he was very into Joseph Campbell, um,
mm.
and he even has a dog named Campbell. Right
Now,
now.
did you read, Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey back then, or not until later?
So Joseph Campbell's book is called A Hero with a Thousand Faces,
Hmm.
and I actually listened to it on audiobook not too long ago.
Hmm.
It's I think I tried to read it a while ago, but it's not very accessible. It's
Mm.
very dense. Like if you found the writer's journey not accessible, then you won't find A Hero with a Thousand Faces to be
Yeah,
accessible. It's much more scholarly, and
yeah.
it's not as clear in the way that it goes from one idea to the next.
Hmm.
It's hard to fully assimilate.
It's a lot of philosophy writings
It's
is like that.
it's also very technical too.
Mm. Now, so did you do that because, like did you remember back in college, you're like, oh, let me explore this, or did you had it in the back of your mind, kind of just always, like, how come do I like this movie better than other movie? That's been always kind of like in the background for you.
Well, so we talked about this earlier, how the hero's journey resonates with people because it touches on these deep, dark archetypes that are inherent to human existence that have gone back thousands and thousands of years. And that idea just interests me on a very fundamental level. That's just, I guess that's the way my personality is made up. That I heard about the hero's journey and it's like, oh, yeah, I like that. I want to know more about that. It just drew me in.
Right. So back in college when you met your friend, did you already, was starting investing and kind of going into it, digging deeper at that time,
Well,
or not until way later?
I've always been interested in in philosophy and history and religion and things, you know, that cut to the deepest levels.
Mm.
And so this seemed, when I was introduced to this idea, it seemed like a roadmap almost that I could approach these ideas from and make better sense of.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, yeah, for me, I didn't come across until, yeah, maybe around Toastmasters time, so maybe two years ago or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
where it's more about storytelling and moving the audience through your framework or your you know your structure so that you can hold them longer.
Yeah,
Because
you can use it as sort of a hack, you know,
yes,
as a storytelling
yes,
hack or a speech hack. Um,
yeah.
but I think it's most powerful. That's a good way to use it. That's a legitimate way to use it. But I think it's most powerful when it's used with reverence, I guess,
Hmm.
and used to try and cut to the deepest levels, or at
Mm.
least in my mind that. But it can be used as a hack as well.
So let's talk about some of the other features or must-have
Okay,
as far as the hero's journey, other than like some of the things we talk about.
so
Um,
the last thing we spoke about was the meeting the mentor.
yeah.
The next phase is crossing the first threshold. I so I can in the Matrix. This is when Neo takes the red pill.
Yeah, and that was so clear when I was going
Yeah,
through this stuff, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's the first big decision he has to make because it's a full commit. Like there's no going back, right?
right, exactly.
And literally it was presented as very binary choice. I think the movie make a really good presentation of that, right? So I
Yeah,
think
it worked really well.
really well, and even for non, because the Matrix this is way before I knew any of this stuff, and I was drawn into that moment. It was definitely a clear moment in the movie. Even if I don't know anything else, I was like, "Ooh, interesting,"
Yeah,
and
so
hold my attention. Yeah.
and you just mentioned something very important. When the hero crosses the first threshold out of the ordinary world into the
Mm,
special world, it's sometimes referred to. There's no turning back.
mm,
Once you take that step, you can never go back to the ordinary world in the manner in which you lived in it before.
yeah.
And what happens after Neo takes the red pill? He wakes up in this vat of goo and with all these wires sticking out of him, and he sees the real world for what it is. So he can never
Hmm.
go back into the Matrix, um, you know, uh, and be ignorant of the real world because he's seen that with his own eyes. So
What was that for Luke? Because I couldn't draw on that when I was reading. I'm like, I don't remember. I seen the movie once, so I don't really
okay,
drawn into it.
so with Luke, it's a little bit more. It's not as clear cut as it was in the Matrix. I
Mm.
think the Matrix is probably the most clear cut.
Yeah,
Crossing
like
the first threshold.
textbook case by case. Because not only did they do that, they literally have two worlds, or
Yeah,
clear cut from the real world versus the Matrix, and that's make it much easier to consume
yeah,
as a consumer. For Luke, I think it was more a gradual process. So there's for you, was there like three things that kind of pinpointed down to
so there's
the threshold?
yes, and he does cross an actual threshold. So
Mm,
he agrees to go with Obi-Wan Kenobi after he finds out that his aunt and uncle have been killed. So his
mm,
ties, his last uh, ties of obligation to the ordinary world have been severed.
mm,
So he's ready to cross the first threshold, and that threshold was the doorway into the cantina, which
mm,
and I've heard it explained this way that like on the borderland between the known and the unknown, which is the borderland between the ordinary world and the special world, there
mm,
exist places like bars and ports and places where there's a crossover from the special world to the ordinary world. So like
mm-hmm.
and this bar exists in a spaceport, so there's aliens from all other places, So he goes in and meets all these dangerous and strange creatures, and so that's when he crosses the threshold, I believe, in Star Wars.
And for Rocky, would it be his first semi-professional match, or when do you think that was for him?
No, I think it's the beginning of his training with Mickey.
Where he picked up the chicken?
Yeah, I mean that was clearly that was a scene. I think
Where
that,
he struggled.
That comes further.
Yeah.
Well, like
further later.
He wakes up on that first morning and drinks a cup full of raw eggs.
Yes.
That's probably it. Like his first day of training, waking up in the morning early, eating raw eggs. There's something symbolic about that, right? A raw egg.
Well, symbolic or not, I'm a big fan of comedy movies, and of course, my introduction to American cinema was in the 90s, and I don't know if you come across Hot Shots before with Jesus. Now I forget his name.
Charlie Sheen.
Yes, and so there was a parody of that scene. I didn't know what the parody was because I've seen that parody in other cinema as well. So when Rocky came out, whenever it came out,
Early
I grew
70s.
up. Yeah, so I grew up in Vietnam, and what we consumed at the time, I didn't know until later, was Hong Kong cinema in China. So there's a lot of Chinese movie that we watched that were dubbed in Vietnamese, and because of the similarities in languages, you can dub it much easier. And it's still engaging to watch. But there was a parody of that Rocky scene, and when I watched Hot Shots, I thought, oh, this is the source. But I didn't know until way later that Rocky is the source of that scene, and so now there's tons of parody and of course references to drinking a glass of eggs, which I find disgusting. But yeah, that was a key. Serious training sequence that I was like, oh, that makes sense. So comparing that to, I guess we're picking on Star Wars. What do you think there was a scene where Rey, crossed a threshold? I think there was for me, but
when she was flying the Millennium Falcon, maybe I don't know.
Yes. To me, that was supposed to be difficult, and so when she crossed that threshold and actually got off planet, she's never gonna go back to that planet, and that was for me like, oh, she got out of it and got into the rest of the what do you call other universe or special universe. So I think they did that, but it was an exciting sequence. So you forgot about that, how much of it was a choice. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing. Like a lot of this has to be a choice, and with Rey, things were happening to her. So this is why we weren't compelled with that storyline as much. At least for me and you, drawn into her because she didn't make a clear decision to do it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, or the decision had been made a long time ago. She was just waiting for the opportunity. There was no conflict though, really. Which is what we talked about before.
Yeah, I think the scene where they were showing her life being miserable by marking the dates, it would have done better if she was more sad about it.
Yeah.
Because I was consuming this book, and obviously I'm only at the beginning, and I'll consume it later and read more of the stuff I don't understand. But there was no clear, sadness or conflict. We know she wanted to leave, but it wasn't that strong. Of like terrible memory or choice. So yeah,
right.
But the Matrix did really well in making him choose literally a pill to do it, to wake up.
But we also had a strong sense of why he found the ordinary world unsatisfying, too. And that doesn't have to be so in your face or specifically spelled out. Like you can have that scene where Luke is staring off at the horizon at the two suns, Or you can have that scene where Neo is asleep at his computer, or sitting in a drab cubicle. And so these ideas can be articulated very efficiently and quickly if done properly. Or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Just a few scenes or snaps, not necessarily the whole thing, but cool. All right. So first threshold.
Yeah.
What else we got that have to happen?
The next phase is called tests, allies, and enemies. So this is when so now the hero has left the ordinary world, is in the special world, and encounters people who live in the special world, and some of them become the hero's friends and allies, and some of them are enemies that try and thwart the hero from accomplishing his goal. So in Neo, or in the Matrix, Neo, of course, meets up with the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar, and he's tested. He goes through his training, downloads. There's that scene where he's trying to jump from one building to the other and fails. So there's all that. And he encounters Agent Smith.
Yeah.
And so
which he already encountered, but at the time we thought he was just, an FBI agent or some agency, like a policeman, not a crazy agent.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that was very cool.
Yeah. So in Star Wars, Luke meets Han Solo and Chewbacca, and the Millennium Falcon. So there's some allies there. They fight against the Empire in terms of like space battles. So there's some pushback there. So there's lots of those types of scenes in this. And this section of a story can be kind of a long section, right? Because a lot of events can fit into this. In Rocky, it's his training, from the beginning of his training to the end of his training, and obviously Mickey is his mentor, but I think there's some other minor characters that sort of, there's not a lot of allies, I think, in Rocky, but Adrian, of course, is an ally, and her older brother, the alcoholic guy. I forget what his name was.
Oh, Phil? No, not Phil. Paul. Polly.
Polly. That's right. Yeah, Polly.
She's her older. I didn't know. I didn't know until this moment that he's the older brother. I thought he's just some dude.
No, yeah, he's Adrian's older brother.
Does he even have any boxing experience in the entire series, or?
He's not a boxer. He's at all. He's like a bum. Basically, works in a meat packing plant. Not that meat packers are bums, but he's an alcoholic and sort of skirts through in life. Is that a phrase?
Because, I don't remember. I think after that movie, first of all, I never knew he was the brother of Rocky's wife, and then after the first movie, he's just there all the time, and I'm like, never understood that he has any, other than the fact that almost like a family have any other special boxing skills. So okay, that explains a lot, because I never understood him.
He's Rocky's tie back to the ordinary world. He's someone who never left the ordinary world.
Gotcha. Cool. What else have to happen other than the enemy that must? Well, not must, but if you don't have it, then the story just falls apart.
Okay. Well, so you go, the hero leaves the ordinary world, in the special world, starts to have adventures. But this is all leading to the climax of the movie. So movies typically, or all stories basically, have 3 acts. There's the first act, which is the ordinary world. There's the second act, where the hero's in the special world and sort of getting acclimated and approaching the climax of the movie. And then the third act is the climax, and then the denouement after the climax. So tests allies and enemies is a very second act kind of portion of the story. So the next phase after that is the approach to the inmost cave. So the inmost cave is where the hero confronts the fear that all this has been leading to, or the primary challenge. So the approach to the inmost cave is actually a small kind of part or scene, and it's typically like I know in the writer's journey they make. Have you ever seen Beverly Hills Cop?
I want to say yes.
Okay.
Remind me who is in there.
Eddie Murphy, Judge Reinhold. So basically,
very briefly, yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a scene in that movie where they're going to attack Victor Maitland, who's like the main adversary in the movie. They're going into his Beverly Hills mansion, and they know he's gonna fight them, or he probably has guns. So there's a scene where they're preparing to go into that mansion, and they're loading their weapons and making sure they're loading their pistols and making sure that they have everything they need to do this. And often there's some soul searching sort of interchange between if I don't make it out of this, tell my family, or remember when we were kids and before all this happened, and that sort of scene happens. Or in some movies, it can be a love scene where the hero and his romantic interests get together finally and have sex or something.
Does it have to happen? How about that?
It doesn't have to happen, but it happens enough to.
Where was it for The Matrix?
The Matrix. Okay, so I can tell you exactly where it is. Morpheus has been captured by Agent Smith, and Neo has to go in and save him, and they're all like, "No, it can't be done," and he's like,
"Yeah,
I believe it can be done." And what do you need in order to accomplish this? And he goes, "Guns, lots of guns." That's okay. Yeah, that's the approach.
That's the innermost cave. Okay.
Well, that's the approach to it. He hasn't gone into the cave yet. This is like preparation to go into the cave.
Gotcha.
And I guess in Star Wars, the inmost cave is the Death Star. Destroying the Death Star is the... So there's the approach to the inmost cave. Then there's the ordeal, and the ordeal is like a major crisis that the hero has to overcome. So the ordeal in The Matrix is when Neo has hand-to-hand combat with Agent Smith, fights him for the first time. Up until that point, he ran from Agent Smith. He finally decided, no, I'm gonna fight this. So he stands up to that fear that he has refused to confront the entire time, and he doesn't defeat Agent Smith. But the important thing is that he confronted that fear, and so after the ordeal is the reward, and what Neo got from confronting that fear. He didn't die. He learned that it is possible to confront that fear and survive it. So that was his reward. And so then there's the road back, and the road back typically involves a chase scene in a movie. They're trying to the major fear has been confronted, and now they got to run back, get out. Yeah. And so movies typically have like a chase scene during that scene, but this all culminates in a second ordeal, which the writer's journey calls the resurrection. And this is when, and Neo is literally resurrected.
Resurrected. That's why it was so easy to follow that movie. Yeah.
He's shot and killed by Agent Smith, but then he comes back to life, and so he's resurrected, and then that's the point when the hero can actually defeat that that
Adversary.
that adversary. Yeah, and then
So for Rocky, is this all basically happening during, the boxing, the last match, all of it, all through the different rounds? And there must have been a round of boxing where where it flipped the switch for him, right?
yeah,
And he basically got another boost of energy and basically,
yeah,
well, for the first movie, he didn't defeat him. So where do you
no,
think the resurrection occur for Rocky when he's about to lose and, for
so
lack of a better term, did lose?
yeah. Well, there was a point at which, you know, in the beginning of the fight, all the announcers were like, "This, it's going to be a bloodbath. Apollo Creed's going to beat this no name guy."
Mm,
And I think Apollo Creed, if I remember correctly, the fight started out where Apollo Creed was clearly the dominant fighter, but then there was a point where Rocky stood up and and fought him harder
mm-hmm,
and surprised everyone. So I think that was the ordeal, and he learned from that experience that, wait a second, maybe I can beat this guy, or maybe I can enter this fight and not be completely annihilated.
mm,
And the resurrection. There was a scene at the end where I think they both knocked each other out, and then they were both
mm,
trying to stand up on the ropes, and Apollo Creed stood up before Rocky. But that
mm,
that that was the death and resurrection, right? Where Rocky was
mm.
lying on the ground, and was, get up, Rocky, get up. So
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
nice. Yeah, and then for Luke, did he? No, he didn't. He didn't confront Darth Vader into the second movie, right? Or it already happened. I don't
Right.
remember.
So the brilliance of the Star Wars original trilogy was that it was like a hero's journey within a hero's journey. So there was a
Yeah.
hero's journey that was very self-contained within the first movie, but then there was an overarching hero's journey that extended through all three movies.
Mm,
Um, so I would say, I mean, it's not that clearly defined, but I think the ordeal was when. So they were trying to rescue Princess Leia on the Death Star. They got her, uh, and the ordeal was when Luke witnessed Obi-Wan being killed by Darth Vader. So
mm,
his father figure, or his mentor, was killed, and so Luke uh, experienced that experience, and then but remained alive. And then
gotcha.
the final resurrection scene has to be when the Death Star explodes,
Mm,
and Luke is a new person after having accomplished something that he
yeah.
previously thought was not accomplishable. So, and that's
Yeah.
this is something actually I wanted to touch on. That the central message, or a central message, to the hero's journey is that if you're stuck in life or in a situation and you want to become unstuck, you've got to face a fear,
Mm,
and because it's that fear that's keeping you stuck.
mm,
And but confronting that fear and overcoming it makes you,
mm-hmm.
makes you a different person. So
Yeah.
you're a different person than you were before you were stuck. So in other words, your old self has to die and a new self has to be reborn,
Yeah.
and
Resurrected.
you have to let that old self die. And so part of what's keeping you stuck in the ordinary world is that you want to cling to that old version. You don't want that old version of yourself to die.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Going into like non-relatable like Ray, she definitely confronted Kylo Ren, but it doesn't seem. I can't remember a point clearly enough that they like resurrected Ray. Like she never.
Yeah,
I guess she suffered defeat a little bit. Uh, she got beat a little bit during that fight, but I never felt like it was, ultimate failure for her. Um, so with the Matrix, it's so clear because, he literally did lose, but he came back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so the final stage is the return with the elixir. So it means
Mm.
the hero returns to the ordinary world, but he's a new and changed person, and he
Mm.
can, um, he's in a position to teach other people. He becomes a mentor. Like he can assume the mentor role to a different hero. At that,
Mm.
like, there's a sense that the mentor is a former hero who went through this journey previously and is able to
Mm.
guide the new hero, on
Yeah.
his journey. So we see that scene where Neo's talking on the phone in the phone booth at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, I want to show you a world without boundaries and all this other stuff. And then he literally,
Yeah.
so he has returned to the ordinary world or the Matrix with this new knowledge that the rules can be broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was so clear cut. I think that's why it resonated really well. Even for because I wasn't exposed to any of this, but I could still follow that. It's
yeah,
it's basically they follow this formula step by step, and they did a really good job with that. Um, I think that's why Star Wars, the original, succeed really well too, and the new ones, didn't hit so hard because we couldn't follow that path as clear cut as some of the movies we liked. That is really cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Resurrection and Ordeal. I did not make it to that part, but yeah, I think if this book was written in a way where it just and there was because I was watching some YouTube videos and other than Christopher Vogler, there's other people out there. Different people have like all these frameworks and maps, for lack of a better term. They just it's like a graph, and if you follow and hit all the points, or at least address it so that an audience member or consumer can just grasp what you're trying to say, then you've succeeded. It makes a compelling story to for someone to follow through.
Yeah, it resonates with that deeper part of ourselves that
So you've been,
has been put in this world and doesn't know what the hell's going on, but wants to find out, or wants to make our way in this world, really.
since you've been following this, I guess, subject for so long, have you play around with writing stories or dig into certain other things that are related? Um,
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of writing a novel right now that I've had the
mm,
idea for it for more than 20 years and
mm,
I've written previous drafts, but I think I know where I want to, how I need to perfect it at this point.
mm.
I've finally reached that point. Um, so yeah, I've written like almost 20,000 words so far.
Mm.
So, and
Cool.
I have the story all mapped out too. Um,
That's good.
yeah,
So, have you read The Martian or seen the movie The Martian?
I've seen the movie. Yeah,
Yeah. So the guy who wrote it, oh God, I only remember his last name is Weir, Weir.
yeah.
He actually was a non-writer, and it's just something he was passionate about. Now I don't know his exposure to the rest of this information, but he actually started writing it as like a it's like a weekly journal kind of thing online, and
Hmm.
it became a book, and then it became a something he published on like Amazon self-published, and very strange because it goes the other way than a normal uh, industry standard, which is you approach a studio and you present a script or you write a book and become a screenplay. He went the other way as far as it became an outline, and they had a following. It was basically what's called a cult following. Like nobody knows about it, but the people that knows about it is a really big fan,
Hmm.
and that's when it became a book, which I found fascinating because that's incredibly rare, and I didn't know any other thing. I didn't know that could happen, but I kind of liked it. I liked it in regards to sci-fi and whatnot. Maybe we can dig into it a later episode, but that was strange as far as how it came together. I'm curious if there's other things out there that happen that way. So some of the bigger success that we have, like Harry Potter and stuff like that, it was very normal and go into a publisher and try to publish a book, not underground publishing the way he did.
Yeah, I think
So,
there are other examples. I I can't remember what another example of it right at this moment, but I know that has happened a few times, and it seems like that's going to be the trend going forward. Like the traditional publishing route is too cumbersome and too elitist, and
yes.
filters out too many people.
Yeah, I think
And
the
it's
way
not
to
as financially rewarding either.
correct, like the traditional way of doing things, including any kind of form of entertainment, right? Like with YouTube, and there's other mediums out there. I don't know if you heard of Twitch or know what it is, but the way the way TV shows and stuff now is, I think it's gonna be more democratic and diversify, and there will be segments of the population, I would call them little bubbles, that are very well informed of it, and when it grows big enough, then it becomes a thing. So yeah, cool. Maybe we'll come across more interesting stuff. Like Netflix shows and stuff like that. It's been definitely gaining for me because I find even last night when I was supposed to do some homework and reading this book, I actually distracted myself and found a TV show that was Russian made on Netflix. And when I consume content on Netflix that are non-English, I'll just watch it in the original sub, or yeah, I'll watch it with subtitles, and I find it to be a lot better. And they're really good in regards to how they're made and the story and all that stuff. And so I think Netflix democratized a lot of that process because they found directors, screenplays, actors, all that stuff without the normal studio and actors and all that stuff. They just do it.
What's the name of the Russian show?
So I was watching, I want to say, let me see here. I want to say Better Than Us. So Better Than Us is the title that's in English, but I do not know the original title. Might be something else. Because some of the stuff that Netflix does is they rent, for lack of a term, movies in other regions of the world, and then rebroadcasted it too. But I think this is a Netflix original. So with Netflix original, they definitely scouted directors, storylines, and all that jazz. So now if you're a famous writer and you do a screenplay, you can just sell it to Netflix instead of the normal movie studios and all that jazz, and it might get better traction if it's good enough. So that's cool.
All right, well, we're almost at an hour and a half, so
yeah, I think we're gonna call it here. Thank you so much for listening. For other listeners out there, stay tuned for next week. But anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, but that was...
shout out to your story. Keep an ear out for your novel.
Yeah, it won't be out for a while.
Gotcha.
Cool.
All right. Goodbye, all. Take care. Hey, this is Thang here with the Epic Meta podcast team. Thank you so much for listening. Did you listen to the whole episode? Did you enjoy it? Were there things that we missed? Were there topics you would like for us to dive deeper into? And of course, what other topics should we discuss in the future? If you have any of these thoughts or comments, please share with us what you think and how you feel regarding the current episode, and of course, other ideas that you might have for future episodes below. As always, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, be good and be well.